As unanimous consent to call the quorum be vitiated.
Without objection.
I now move to proceed to calendar number 183, S1619.
The clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to calendar number 183, S1619, a bill to provide for identification of misaligned currency, require action to correct the misalignment, and for other purposes.
Mr. President, I have a cloture motion that is at the desk.
The clerk will report.
Cloture motion. We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, hereby move to bring to a close the debate on the motion to proceed to calendar number 183, S1619, a bill to provide for identification of misaligned currency, require action to correct the misalignment, and for other purposes, signed by 17 senators as
Madam
follows.
President, I ask unanimous consent the names not be read.
Is it 927?
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that on Monday, October 3rd at 4:30 p.m. Well, Madam President, I failed to ask that the mandatory quorum under Rule 22 be waived in the previous matter.
Without objection.
I now ask unanimous consent that on Monday, October 3rd, 2011 at 4:30 p.m. the Senate proceed to executive session to consider the following nominations. Count numbers are 113, 171, 172, 173, 184, and 357, that there be 1 hour for debate, equally divided in the usual form. Upon the use or yielding back of that time, counter number 171, 172, 173, 184, and 357 be confirmed. The Senate proceed to vote without intervening action or debate on count number 113. Further, that at time to be determined by the majority leader after consulting with the Republican leader, but not prior to October 11th, the Senate proceed to executive session to consider the following nominations. Calendars number 250, 251, 252, and 253. That there be 2 hours for debate, equally divided in the usual form. Upon the use or yielding back of the time, the Senate proceed to vote with no intervening action or debate on the nominations in the order listed. Further, that all listed nominations, a motion to reconsider be considered made and laid on the table with no intervening action or debate, that no further motions be in order to any of the nominations. That any statements related to the nominations be printed in the record, that the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action, and the Senate then resume legislative session.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to executive session to consider the following nominations. Count numbers 281, 324, 325, 326, 327, 328, 329, 330, 331, 332, 333, 334, 335, 336, 343, 347, 348, 349, 350, 351, 352, 362, 368, 369, 370, and 404, that the nominations be confirmed in block. The motions to reconsider be considered made and laid on the table. With no intervening action or debate, that no further motions be in order to any of the nominations, that any related statements be printed in the record, and that President Obama be immediately notified of the Senate's action.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee be discharged from further consideration of Presidential Nomination 541, Mark D. Acton, Postal Regulatory Commission. Presidential Nomination 542, Robert Todd, Postal Regulatory Commission. That the nominations be confirmed and blocked, the motion reconsidered be considered made and laid on the table. There be no intervening action or debate. No further motions be in order. The nominations and any related statements be printed in the record, and the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action.
Without objection.
Madam President, we've been working very hard on Heather Hickenbotham. Heather Hickenbotham has been nominated to be Deputy Director of the Office of Management and Budget. Very, very important assignment. We've been trying to confirm her for almost 6 months. I hope and understand that Senator Kyl is working with the administration on something that will clear this nominations. I'm not going to ask consent tonight, but all my Republican colleagues should be prepared for a unanimous consent request on this nomination when we return next week. I hope Senator Kyl will allow this nomination to go forward after his request is satisfied. I ask unanimous consent that the Senate consider executive calendar numbers 2 and 3, which are treaty documents 110-23, 111-6, that the treaties be considered as having advanced through the various parliamentary stages up to and including the presentation of the resolutions of ratification. That any further declarations be agreed to as applicable. That any statements be printed in the record as if read. Further, when the votes on the resolution of ratification are taken, the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table en bloc. That the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action and the Senate then resume legislative session.
Without objection, the clerk will report.
Mr. President.
Treaty Doc 110-23, Investment Treaty with Rwanda. Treaty Doc 111-6, Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty with Bermuda.
I ask for a division vote on each of the resolutions of ratification.
A division vote has been requested on Treaty Document 110-23. All those in favor stand and be counted. All those opposed stand and be counted. On a division vote, 2/3 of the senators present having voted in the affirmative, the resolution of ratification is agreed to. A division vote has been requested on Treaty Document 111-6. All those in favor stand and be counted. All those opposed stand and be counted. On a division vote, 2/3 of the senators present having voted in the affirmative, the resolution ratification is agreed to.
Now I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to calendar number 174.
The clerk will report.
Calendar number 174.
That's H.R.
The Senate returns to legislative session. The clerk will report.
Calendar number
Madam
174,
President.
H.R. 2005, an act to reauthorize the Combating Autism Act of 2006.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure?
I know of no further debate on this matter, Madam President.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed. Being no further debate, the question is on the passage of the bill. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? In the opinion of the chair, the ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The bill is passed.
I ask unanimous consent that the motion to reconsider be laid on the table and that any statements relating to this bill appear at this point in the record.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to calendar number 176, S. 1280.
The clerk will report.
176 S1280, a bill to amend the Peace Corps Act and so forth and for other purposes.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I ask unanimous consent the substitute amendment, the desk be agreed to, the committee report amendment as amended be agreed to, the bill as amended be read a third time and passed, and motion to reconsider be laid on the table. Any statements relating to this matter appear at the appropriate place in the record as if given.
Without objection.
I ask consent the Judiciary Committee be discharged from further consideration. S.J. Res. 22.
The clerk will report.
SJ Res 22, to grant the consent of Congress to an amendment to the compact between the states of Missouri and Illinois, providing that bonds issued by the Bi-State Development Agency may mature and not to exceed 40 years.
Without objection, the committee is discharged and the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I ask unanimous consent the joint resolution be passed, the preamble be agreed to, the motion reconsidered be considered made and laid on the table. There be no intervening action or debate, and any statements related to this matter be placed in the record at the appropriate place as if read.
Without objection.
I ask consent the Senate proceed now to H. Con. Res. 81.
The clerk will report.
H. Con. Res. 81, directing the Clerk of the House of Representatives to make a correction in the enrollment of H.R. 2608.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I ask unanimous consent the concurrent resolution be agreed to, the motion reconsidered be laid on the table. There be no intervening action or debate. Any statements relating to this matter be placed in the record at the appropriate place as if read.
Without objection.
I ask consent the Judiciary Committee be discharged from further consideration of S-Res 275.
The clerk will report.
S-Res 275, designating October 30th, 2011 as a National Day of Remembrance for Nuclear Weapons Program workers.
Without objection, the committee is discharged and the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, the motion be considered laid on the table. There be no intervening action or debate. Any statements relating to this matter appear in the record at the appropriate places if given.
Without objection,
I ask consent the Senate now proceed to S-Res 283.
the clerk will report.
S-Res 283, designating the year of 2011 as International Year of Chemistry.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, the motion be considered laid on the table. There be no intervening action or debate, and any related statements be printed in the record as if read.
Without objection,
I ask consent the Senate proceed to S-Res 284 now.
the clerk will report.
S-Res 284, designating September 23rd, 2011 as National Falls Prevention Awareness Day to raise awareness and encourage the prevention of falls among older adults.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, the motion be considered laid on the table. There be no intervening action or debate, and any related statements be printed in the record as if read.
Without objection,
I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business day, it adjourn until Thursday, September 29th, 2011 at 1:45 p.m. for a pro forma session only, with no business conducted, and following the pro forma session, the Senate adjourn on Monday, October 3rd, 2011 at 2 p.m. Following the prayer and the pledge, journal proceedings be approved to date. Morning hour be deemed expired, and the time for the two leaders be reserved for the use later in the day. Following any leader remarks, the Senate be in a period of morning business till 3:30 p.m. The senators permitted to speak for up to 10 minutes each. And the following morning business, the Senate resume consideration of the motion to proceed to S-1619, the Currency Exchange Rate Oversight Reform Act, with the time until 4:30 p.m. equally divided and controlled between the two leaders or the designees. At 4:30 p.m., the Senate proceed to executive session under the previous order. Finally, the closure vote with respect to the motion to proceed to S-1619 occur when the Senate resumes legislative session following a roll call vote on the confirmation of Henry Floyd be United States Circuit Judge for the Fourth Circuit.
without objection,
Madam President, then there will be two roll call votes at 5:30 p.m. on Monday. The first vote will be confirmation of Henry Floyd of South Carolina, and the second vote will be on the motion to invoke cloture on the motion to proceed S-1619. So if there's no further business coming before the Senate, I ask that it adjourn under the previous order.
the Senate stands adjourned until 1:45 p.m., Thursday, September 29th.
The Senate today wrapping things up until they come back in next week. Earlier, senators blocked an amendment offered by Majority Leader Reid to the temporary 2020